You're listening to Zariya Hollow, a horror anthology, where the veil between worlds is but a whisper away. Stay tuned, for the terror is just beginning.
As the leaves of Witchcrest Peak surrender to the frost's embrace, and the first whispers of winter weave through the forest, a change stirs within the land. The air grows colder, the nights longer, and with them come secrets veiled in ice and shadow. Here, where the boundary between our world and what lies beyond grows fragile, an enigmatic presence lurks, its breath as cold as the north wind. Tonight, we venture into a tale hidden beneath the frost-covered boughs, a tale of what waits in the silence of the snow. Listen closely, for in the heart of winter, every sound tells a story.
With the turn of the season, Witchcrest Peak dons its winter mantle, the once verdant hills now cloaked in a blanket of snow. The frost-kissed trees stand sentinel over a land transformed, where beauty and peril walk hand in hand. In the heart of this frozen expanse, secrets old as the mountains themselves lie dormant, waiting. There's a story here, etched into the ice, hidden in the crunch of snow beneath our feet. This evening, we tread softly into a narrative woven from the chill of the north, a narrative that whispers of things unseen, things that stir with the coming of the frost. Let the fire keep you warm, for outside, the cold harbors far more than just the winter's touch.
Welcome, esteemed guests, to Zariya Hollow. This grand abode, set against the backdrop of the stoic Witchcrest Peak, has stood as a silent witness to many a tale whispered through the corridors of time. As winter cloaks our land in a shroud of frost and mystery, we gather in the heart of this house to recount tales that have lingered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to be told. Here, where each ember in the fireplace holds a secret, and every snowflake bears a story, I invite you to join us in unraveling the enigmatic tapestry of Zariya Hollow. Come. Find warmth by our hearth, and immerse yourself in the tales that are as much a part of this place as the very stones that build it.
Sitting upon this gentle hill, my gaze drifts northward where the town of Shadowbrook Camp unfolds beneath the watchful eye of Witchcrest Peak. To my right, the stately presence of Hendrickson Hall anchors the landscape, its eastern walls warmed by the touch of the morning sun. The mountain before me, a towering figure crowned with the day's first light, stands as a silent guardian over all. The river, a silver ribbon in the valley, sings a melody that has flowed through the ages, a constant hum that speaks of cycles and seasons. The wind carries whispers of the past, a soft chorus that rustles through the leaves, telling tales of ancient times when the land was wild and untamed. Even the insects join the symphony, their subtle buzz harmonizing with the river's song. crafting a living hymn to the beauty and mystery that is the Old Witch. Here, in the daylight's embrace, I feel the pulse of the earth, the breath of the wind, and the subtle rhythm of life that dances to the tune of the wild, a melody composed by the land itself, echoing the song of the witch, whose spirit is said to linger in the mountain's shadow. It is in these moments of quiet reflection that the bond between our stories and this land becomes most clear. An intertwining of fates and tales, as old as the stones that form the heart of Witchcrest. This land, with its untamed heart, is a canvas of natural majesty, and the people, mere brushstrokes of color and texture. The settlers of Shadowbrook Camp, resilient in their daily endeavors, weave their narratives into the fabric of this place, telling of a life intimately entwined with the wilderness. The sounds of industry and daily life, the harmonious clash of development against the backdrop of timeless wilderness, speak to the unyielding spirit of these people. From the echoing strike of the blacksmith's anvil to the distant laughter of children at play. Life here is a vibrant tapestry, each thread a story, each color a dream. As the sun crowns the day, casting its light upon the noble estate, the inhabitants of Hendrickson Hall begin their daily symphony of life. Adeline Thornway, the housekeeper, moves through the halls with a grace born of years, tending to the needs of the house and its denizens. Her sharp eyes miss nothing. A stray speck of dust, a book out of place. She carries with her the quiet authority of one who knows the manor's secrets, as well as she knows the lines on her own palm.
From the diary of Adeline Thornway. The memory is clear as I recount it, the scene unfolding like a delicate play in the low light of the aftermath. The séance had left its mark, an indelible shadow upon the room, and none felt it more keenly than Madame Ruth. As she came to, her eyes clouded with the remnants of the trance, it was Esme's voice, tinged with a strain that spoke of inner turmoil that anchored her back to reality.
Madame Ruth, can't you hear me?
Esme, what happened?
Esme knelt beside her, the words gentle yet fraught with the weight of the experience, informing Ruth that for a time she was not herself, that the spirit they sought had used her, no, not used, borrowed, her voice for its own.
Was it her voice?
And there it was, the heart of Esme's pain laid bare in the aftermath of Ruth's unwitting performance. But with grace, Esme absolved her friend of blame, her hand raised not in anger, but in the silent offering of forgiveness.
Oh God, Esme, the weight of that, I'm...
But Esme cut her off, not unkindly, to stem the flow of apologies for things beyond Ruth's control. Their bond, it seems, was made of sterner stuff than the spirits could tamper with.
Ruth, there's nothing for you to regret. That spirit, it used the darkest part of my history to try and wound me, but it didn't, and it won't. I've been running from this pain for too long. It was like living that night all over again. The night I chose a different path, the night I chose Isaac as my husband and my own life. I stood up to her then, and I stood up to whatever that spirit was tonight, and I'll do it again. Every time. I am not that frightened girl anymore. I am Esme, of my own making, not of my mother's, nor of Shadow's. That slap, it was a specter of my past, but it won't find its mark again. Not now, not ever. It just supi Esme. Mo as I am my father's daughter. His resolve runs through my veins, and I am your steadfast companion, Ruth. Our friendship, it has been a lantern in the fog, a steadfast beacon amidst the mire of my former life. Let's leave the past where it belongs, in the dark.
Madame Ruth's relief was a thing almost visible, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And in that moment, their friendship was the balm to the night's wounds.
This means more than you know, Esme. How can I ever...
I saw my moment to interject, to bring a small light into the shadowed room. Ladies, the samovar is ready. Perhaps some tea will help soothe the nerves.
A samovar here?
Yes, Mr. Hendrickson has one. I remembered your favorite Russian tea. I thought it might be comforting.
Madame Ruth's expression transformed, a mix of surprise and affection, as she understood the gesture. Esme had remembered her fondness for a particular tea, a small yet profound comfort in the midst of chaos.
Esme, that's very kind. Thank you.
And with that, the heavy air seemed to lift. They rose together, two friends bound by more than the evening's spectral events, moving toward the promise of warmth and the familiar ritual of tea. The séance room, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, exudes an eerie calm following the evening's supernatural explorations. Madame Ruth sits with her eyes slowly fluttering open, returning from the depths of her trance. Esme keeps a watchful eye on her, while Adeline Thornway, the reliable housekeeper, surveys the room with an air of readiness. Johnny Bailey shifts his weight from foot to foot, a nervous energy about him. Reinhard Hendrickson's gaze is thoughtful, his mind turning over the night's revelations. Takoda Moon, a silent observer throughout the séance, stands with a respectful distance, his eyes locked on the group.
In our fervent quest for knowledge, we have dared to disturb the slumber of the unseen, to beckon the whispers from the darkness of Witchcrest Peak. It is our right, nay, our purpose, to unravel the universe's hidden threads. What are spirits but another mystery for the mind of man to master?
Hear the roar of the tempest as it tumbles across Witchcrest Peak. Legend whispers that with each storm's rise, the witch is there, agitating her cauldron, concocting acts as shadowy as the shrouded eve. And that laugh, skirting the thunderclap, it's told to be her mockery, resonating through the very marrow of the mountains.
What do you mean, Mrs. Thornway?
Esme, my dear, what we've witnessed tonight, it's as if the witch knew to prey upon your deepest fears, to speak with a voice that should never have been here. This is no mere weather, but a reflection of our ordeal, the skies themselves echoing the unrest of spirits we've dared to disturb. And that laugh, the witch's cackling as the old folks call it, it's more than mere superstition tonight. It's a warning, a chilling reminder that some boundaries are not to be crossed. The spirits, they're not just tales to be told by the fireside. They're as real as the air we breathe. And tonight, They've shown us their power, their pain. We've awakened something with our search for knowledge, something that's been resting in the shadows of Witchcrest Peak for more time than we can fathom. And now, with every crackle of the witches' laughter in the storm, I can't help but feel it's a sign, a warning that some things are better left alone. We've all felt it, haven't we? That voice, the one that used Madame Levine's tone to torment you, Esme. It's as if the very storm is an extension of that voice, a reminder from the mountain itself that it guards its secrets fiercely, and those who seek to unveil them must be prepared for the wrath they may unleash.
The spirits seem to have stirred the heavens themselves.
Or perhaps it is simply the season for storms, both ethereal and earthly.
Let us hope it is only the weather and not an omen.
Gunakti, what is it?
His face goes pale, his eyes widen with fear, and he clutches his chest, his breath hitching.
The secrets and the shadows.
Dr. Wainwright? Someone help him!
Dakota, the doctor's bag.
Quickly now, we must lay him flat. Johnny, go fetch Dr. Peabody.
I'll take the buggy. No time to waste.
Wainwright, heed the tempest's merciless call. The witch of Witchcrest Peak revels in your fall. Her laughter, a curse upon your prideful quest, echoes your doom as your heart clenches in your chest. You've dared to disturb the slumber of her keep, where shadows weave nightmares and the damned weep. The peak's heart beats in darkness, entwined with despair. Your trespass now summons the storm from her lair. Her cackle cuts through the night, a chilling cleave, a spectral mockery of the breath you struggle to heave. The witch's ire is the wind, her spite the rain, your folly the thunder, your agony her gain. So, Wainwright, feel the grip of the peak's chilling hand as the Witch of Witchcrest decrees your final stand. Your hubris, now silenced by her vengeful night. In the heart of the storm, forfeit your light.
Esme, fetch the liniment from the cabinet. It may ease his pain until the doctor arrives.
Esme nods quickly and hurries to a tall, ornate cabinet, her hand searching for the small bottle of liniment.
Madame Ruth places a cushion under Wainwright's head, her movements gentle but efficient.
The raven calls again, a solitary, haunting sound that seems almost mocking in the face of human frailty. Dakota Moon opens the doctor's bag with practiced hands, his expression focused as he looks for anything that might help.
We may need to loosen his clothing, make it easier for him to breathe.
Reinhardt nods, his hands moving to the buttons of Wainwright's vest, his actions calm but hurried.
Hold on, Wainwright. The doctor will be here soon.
The rain begins to pelt against the window panes, a relentless downpour that adds a sense of urgency to the room. The thunder rumbles closer now, a deep resonating sound that seems to be in dialogue with the crisis inside.
Esme returns with the liniment, her face pale but composed as she hands the bottle to Takoda.
Here, will this help?
Takoda takes the liniment, nodding his thanks, and applies a small amount to Wainwright's temples, hoping to provide some relief.
This should help soothe you, Professor.
The professor's breaths come a bit easier, but his eyes are still closed, his face a grimace of pain.
The group waits in tense silence, the only sounds the storm outside and Wainwright's labored breathing. Each person is lost in their own thoughts, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily upon them. As the minutes pass, the urgency becomes a waiting game, each second stretching out as they await the return of Johnny with Dr. Peabody. The storm seems to be waiting too, holding its breath for the doctor's arrival.
Then, as if on cue, the sound of buggy wheels splashing through puddles reaches them, growing louder and more insistent. It's Johnny, returning with the doctor. Hope flickers in the room as the sound grows closer, a lifeline thrown into the tempest of the night.
From the diary of Dr. Edward Peabody. The night was marked by an urgent call to Hendrickson Hall. It was around 3 o'clock when they summoned me. The chill of the night air was sharp as I hurried to attend to Dr. Wainwright, who had suffered a heart attack. Upon my arrival, I found Dr. Wainwright in a dire state. His symptoms were clear indicators of cardiac distress, a life hanging in the balance, demanding immediate medical intervention. The administering of digitalis to steady his heart and laudanum for the pain were my immediate recourse. As I worked to stabilize him, I noticed something peculiar, something out of the ordinary that gave me pause, a mark on his chest. It was not akin to any bruise or lesion familiar to my practice, but rather, it was almost as if... But no. My primary concern was the matter of life and death. The mysteries of the mark, intriguing as they may be, had to be set aside in favor of the immediate task at hand. Yet, in the quiet moments as I watched over Dr. Wainwright, ensuring his breathing steadied and his heart regained its rhythm, my mind kept returning to that unusual mark. Its shape, neither random nor natural, seemed to hold a meaning just beyond my grasp. A pattern reminiscent of ancient lore, a symbol that perhaps held significance in forgotten histories or undiscovered sciences. The appearance of the mark was peculiar, akin to a frostbite burn, yet clearly defined as if etched with intention. Under the fluctuating hues of his flushed skin, brought on by his cardiac distress, the mark stood out with an eerie prominence. It was as if the very extremities of cold had conspired to inscribe this symbol upon his flesh. This mark, visible only in the throes of his heart's turmoil, suggests a connection between his physical ailment and something far more arcane. One might speculate that in his pursuits, Dr. Wainwright has stirred forces that respond not just in ethereal whispers, but in tangible physical manifestations. The nature of this symbol, akin to those found in Cotton Mather's texts of ancient witchcraft, raises questions that challenge the boundaries of my medical understanding. Could it be that in his explorations of the supernatural, Dr. Wainwright has inadvertently marked himself with a sign known only to those who have delved too deeply into forbidden knowledge? For now, these musings must remain within the confines of this diary. The immediate concern is Dr. Wainwright's recovery from this heart attack. However, the mystery of this mark cannot be ignored. It beckons further study, a careful foray into the realms where science and myth intertwine. As I retire for the night, the image of that mark lingers in my mind, a silent reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden within and beyond the human body. What secrets does it hold? What truths about our world does it hint at? These are questions for another day, under the clear light of reason and inquiry. As I extinguish the candle and prepare for a few hours of rest before dawn, I am reminded of the delicate dance between life and death, between the known and the unknown. As a physician, I am sworn to heal, to protect life. But tonight's events have shown me that there are realms of healing and understanding that extend beyond the reaches of my medical texts and instruments.
In the hushed corridors of Hendrickson Hall, where echoes of bygone eras seem to weave into the very fabric of the place, a disturbance shatters the silence in the sequestered room of Professor Wainwright. Susanna, driven by a boundless curiosity and a lively spirit, dashes after one of Mr. Hendrickson's elusive feline denizens. The chase, a whirlwind of motion disrupting the quiet order, culminates in an unexpected discovery. Amidst the chaos of upended furniture and dancing papers, a diary bound in weathered leather. I turn to a page, which is dated mere weeks before our arrival in Shadowbrook Camp.
In the late hours of night, within the sanctum of my scholarly study, amidst a collection of rare tomes and obscure maps, my thoughts invariably turn to that enigmatic entity I encountered in the distant wilderness of Canada. This being, which I dare not name even in my deepest contemplation, has become the cornerstone of my intellectual journey. The lore, passed down by the Algonquin tribes, speaks of a transformation wrought from the darkest depths of human despair and pain. These stories, rich in cultural lore and shrouded in fear, describe a force that is both spiritual and tangible, a manifestation of a primal and dark hunger. This interest in the esoteric was unusual for a Harvard professor in those days, but my curiosity knew no bounds. I delved into the realms of the supernatural and the psychological with a fervor not commonly found in academic circles of my time. I pored over historical accounts from early settlers, often dismissed as mere superstition by my contemporaries, finding in them a consistent thread of awe and terror towards a shadowy presence in the uncharted wilderness, a presence that has haunted the imaginations and nightmares of those close to the forest's heart. My explorations led me to a hypothesis, unconventional for its time, suggesting a psychological basis for these folklore tales, yet going beyond the nascent field of psychology. I proposed a connection between these transformative curses and the unexplored depths of the human psyche, a concept that both intrigued and unsettled my academic peers. These studies brought me face to face with historical incidents bearing the hallmarks of encounters with this mysterious entity. These events, often overlooked in the annals of history, stood as stark reminders of the creature's profound and terror-inducing impact on individuals and communities. My own encounter with this creature was a chapter of my life filled with both dread and revelation. It was not just a confrontation with a being of flesh and bone, but an encounter with a manifestation of the land's own suffering and a nameless, ancient hunger. Now, as I set my sights on the unsettling events at Witchcrest Peak, I am keenly aware that this venture is more than a scholarly pursuit. It is a descent into a past I have tried to forget, a confrontation with a truth that lies at the intersection of folklore, history, and the realms beyond our understanding. This creature, in all its formidable guises, symbolizes the unfathomable mysteries that dwell in the shadowed edges of our world.
Professor Wainwright's entries paint a portrait of a trek laden with foreboding, where he faced an enigma that embodies the fierce and savage heart of the wilderness, a force that seared its presence into his being. His brush with the raw spirit of the North has unwittingly equipped him for the enigmas now surfacing at Hendrickson Hall. As the ethereal and the tangible merge, it is my duty to help decipher this puzzle. With Susanna by my side, a quiet companion to the deepening mystery, I seal the diary, a vow etched in my resolve. We shall confront the spectral presence at Witchcrest Peak, not with trepidation, but with a comprehension shaped by Wainwright's own encounters. And in unity, we will endeavor to mend the fray in the delicate tapestry of this realm.
In the shadowed embrace of Hendrickson Hall's library, a room where time often seemed to stand still, we found ourselves on the brink of a journey into the darkness. The fire's gentle crackling was like a quiet symphony, setting the stage for revelations that might alter the very fabric of our reality. Mr. Hendrickson, Dakota Moon, and I were gathered, united by a common purpose, yet divided by our own silent fears.
Mr. Hendrickson, in the professor's quarters, I found this. His journal. Its words. They are unsettling. It is time these secrets were brought to light.
Dakota, are we stepping into forbidden territory? It is, after all, his private journal.
I understand the gravity, sir. But what it reveals, it's about the recent happenings, the creature, and much more that's been hidden from us.
Delving into hidden truths can be a double-edged sword, Mr. Moon. Yet, if it sheds light on our plight, we must proceed. Reinhardt's hand hesitates before taking the diary, as if understanding the weight of what it contains. He opens the cover, and the crackling fire lends its voice to the hush that falls between them.
Beneath the canopy of the ancient forest, where reality and legend intertwine, I have unearthed tales of an entity, a spirit bound by time and hunger.
The secrets of the forest. They are as old as the hills that surround us.
My sojourn at Shadowbrook Camp opened my eyes to a tapestry of fear and awe. A creature that stands outside our realm of understanding. Even the hardiest of miners speak its name with a tremor in their voice. In the remote, untamed expanses of Canada, I encountered the unfathomable. Its presence has lingered over me like a perpetual shadow.
Professor Wainwright walked among these secrets, yet he chose silence. He faced this entity, confronted this dread, and yet he shielded us from the truth. Why?
Some truths are too harrowing, Mrs. Thornway. They can fracture the sturdiest of spirits.
That day, what I witnessed, the ordeal we endured, it has irrevocably altered the course of my life. Since then, I have been ensnared in a flight from memories too dark to fathom.
Now I comprehend the depth of his torment. Gunachti has been wrestling with this terror in solitude, guarding us from its shadow.
Wainwright's secret is a heavy shroud he's woven and worn in silence. Wainwright and I, we've both walked paths shrouded in secrets, some spoken, others left in the silence of our own hearts. In this journal, his hidden journey into the Canadian wilderness after our time in Montreal. I understand the weight of untold stories, the reasons we keep certain truths buried. Yet this revelation, and amidst the tragedies at Witchcrest Peak, it stirs a deep pondering within me. We both have our reasons for the secrets we keep. It's a delicate balance, knowing when to reveal and when to withhold. But this is his silence on something so critical, it gives me pause. Could his hidden knowledge have spared some of the anguish we faced? Yet, who am I to judge his choices? We've each had our burdens to bear, our own shadows to wrestle with.
Let's read on. The entries I marked with scraps of paper. Those are the ones that refer to what he's called the Canadien incident. We need to understand the full extent of what Wainwright encountered. His experiences, though hidden, might hold the key to unlocking the mysteries we're grappling with here at Witchcrest Peak. For as long as I have known Professor Wainwright, I have heard vague references to something that he called the Canadien incident. But every time I asked, he'd change the subject or stall. Now, after what's happened, finding this, it's like a piece of a puzzle I never knew I was missing.
From the diary of Aloysius Wainwright. As I recall that fateful hunting trip in the Canadian wilderness, the memories still send a chill down my spine. It was I,
Professor Aloysius Wainwright, who adventured into those untamed forests with my nephew, a spirited young man fresh from his scholarly pursuits. We were not alone in our quest. Hank Davis, a master of moose hunting, and his Indian guide, Defago, joined us. Our camp was set up in a secluded spot on 50 Island Water, deep within the wilds of northwestern Ontario. There was a sense of joviality among us, yet an unspoken awareness of the wilderness' unpredictable nature lingered in the air. Many hunting parties that year returned empty-handed. The moose were uncommonly shy. As for myself and my guide, we were among those who came back not with trophies, but with memories of an experience far more significant than any hunt. I was joined by my nephew, young Simpson, a divinity student unacquainted with the Canadian backwoods, and his guide, Joseph Defago. Defago was a French-Canadian with an uncanny knowledge of the wilderness, a man who loved the solitude of the wild with a near-obsessive passion. For this expedition, Defago was Hank's choice. Despite Hank's occasional expletive-laden banter with Defago, there was a deep mutual respect between the two seasoned woodsmen. Hank, however, had one reservation about Defago: his tendency to lapse into silent, brooding periods, a trait Hank attributed to Defago's Latin temperament. These bouts of moroseness seemed linked to prolonged exposure to civilization, and were always cured by a return to the wilderness. Our group, including Punk, an Indian who acted as our cook, found ourselves encamped in a desolate region north of Rat Portage during the last week of October. That evening, the atmosphere around the fire was somber. A week had passed without any sign of moose. Defago's attempt at a song and story was thwarted by Hank's critical interjections, leading to a sullen quiet from the French Canadien. The fire was dying, the stars shone coldly overhead, and a winter chill was creeping in. Hank, breaking the silence, suggested a change in our hunting strategy. "We should try new ground tomorrow, Doc," he said, his voice cutting through the still air. I agreed, seeing the wisdom in his suggestion. Hank proposed splitting up. He and I would explore westward, while Defago and Simpson would check the southern shore of 50 Island water. Defago, silent and brooding, didn't reply, his gaze fixed on the fire. I sensed an unspoken fear in him. Hank, noticing this, lightly joked, "He's just scared of some old fairy tale." Defago snapped back defiantly, "Nothing in the bush can scare Joseph Defago." The conversation, interrupted by the sudden presence of Punk, remained etched in my memory. Punk, listening in from the shadows, seemed to stir some ancient fear or belief within himself. The evening concluded with Hank and Defago retiring to their tent and Punk to his lean-to. Later in our tent, Simpson and I discussed the day's events. I found myself preoccupied with Defago's reaction and Hank's unfinished revelations. What was it about the area around 50 Island water that had disturbed Defago so deeply? The night was deep and silent, the wilderness around us vast and inscrutable. As sleep finally claimed me, I wondered about the mysteries hidden in these ancient forests. Mysteries that seemed to touch upon the very essence of fear and the unknown. In the dead of night, old Punk, moved by some inscrutable instinct, ventured out to the lake's edge. Though I was unaware at the time, he seemed to sense something in the air, something that stirred the age-old superstitions of his race. He returned to his bed, the silent forest closing around him once more. A change in the wind brought with it a strange, unsettling odor, a scent that passed fleetingly over our camp and disappeared into the depths of the wilderness. It was an odor of something wholly unknown, and it left a disquieting impression on the sleeping men, though none awoke. The next morning, Hank, Simpson, Defago, and I set out on our separate ways, each carrying the weight of the previous night's unease. The wilderness around us was vast and untamed, a reminder that in these ancient woods, the line between reality and myth was as thin as the morning mist. As the first light of dawn crept through the wilderness, our camp stirred to life. The light snowfall from the night before had left the air crisp and invigorating. Punk, our dependable cook, had already started breakfast preparations, filling the air with the welcoming aromas of coffee and bacon. Hank, ever enthusiastic, was observing Simpson, my nephew, and his guide Defago load their canoe. "Wind's shifted," he called out robustly. "It's across the lake. Dead right for you fellers, and the snow will make bully trails. Good luck, Monsieur Defago." His joviality added a light-hearted touch to the morning, with Defago returning the sentiment in equally good spirits, a pleasant change from his previously somber mood. By 8 o'clock, the camp had quieted down significantly. Hank and I were making progress along our westward trail, while Defago and Simpson, a diminishing silhouette on the lake, paddled eastward. The sun, now fully risen, bathed the surrounding wilderness in a warm glow. The expansive bush stretched out before us, a majestic and untamed expanse reaching toward the frozen shores of Hudson Bay. From my vantage point, I could see the awe in Simpson's eyes as he absorbed the austere beauty of the landscape for the first time. The sense of vastness and freedom was palpable, even from a distance. Defago, an experienced guide, navigated the canoe with ease, filling the air with fragments of old voyager songs. The natural barrier of employer and employee seemed to dissolve in this environment, leaving them simply as two men against the wilderness.
Uncle Alu, I want to tell you in detail the peculiar and unsettling events I experienced with Defago during our expedition. It began with an overwhelming sense of both awe and intimidation, given the sheer scale of the Canadian wilderness, a scale far beyond what I'd known in my travels through Switzerland or my homeland, Scotland. On reaching 50 Island Water, I remember watching Defago skillfully turn over the canoe and blaze the spruce stems, marking our trail, a precaution that struck me profoundly. His casual remark about finding the canoe if something happened to him underscored our isolation and vulnerability in this vast wilderness. As we ventured deeper into the forest, I realized the true enormity of our surroundings. The majestic yet merciless nature of the tangled backwoods was unmistakable. I felt a profound smallness, an awareness of my own insignificance in the face of such ancient, unyielding wilderness. Defago, with his experience and knowledge, seemed the only link to a world where man held any semblance of control. The evening progressed, and after a meal of freshly caught fish, Defago ventured out again, leaving me alone by the campfire. The solitude was profound, stirring a mix of fear and fascination within me. As the dusk deepened and the fire crackled, the silence of the forest was both majestic and unsettling. The vast expanse of 50 Island Water, the intricate play of light and shadow, all of it created a backdrop of eerie beauty. It was then, Uncle, that I asked Defago to sing one of his old Voyager songs, hoping perhaps to lighten the atmosphere. His voice carrying across the water was strangely moving.
I live way up to the north, they say, where the hunters may die all alone, where the red man has told a legend so old of death and his sound is a moan. I fly where the forest meets the sky, race the north wind where I go. My feet are on fire as I run and I cry. My name is Wendigo. Where I walk, I the prints of my feet, burned in the ice and the snow. And the hunter who sees looks above in the trees. It's the mark of the Wendigo.
Yet, partway through, he stopped abruptly. His sudden alertness, the way he sniffed the air and scanned the surroundings, was alarming. His whole demeanor suggested he sensed an unseen presence. His face, usually so ruddy and open, was now pale, almost ghostly in the flickering firelight. Preoccupied with thoughts he was hesitant to share. He mentioned that the song he was singing often brought back troubling memories, but it was clear there was more to it than just an old melody stirring the past. Driven by a mix of curiosity and an unsettling sense of foreboding, I broached a subject I sensed was at the heart of his distress. Defago, tell me about the Wendigo. You mentioned it earlier. What is it exactly? At the mention of the Wendigo, Defago's already tense demeanor tightened further. He turned swiftly, his eyes wide and glinting in the firelight, his mouth agape as if he were about to shout. But all he whispered was, "It's nothing. Just a story, a legend the old lumberjacks and trappers talk about when the night gets too dark and the fire too low." He described the Wendigo as a mythical creature from the depths of the northern forests, a being of terrifying aspect, quick as lightning, and larger than any known animal. It was said to embody the very essence of the wilderness, unbound and unfathomable. His words were laced with a fear that seemed to go beyond mere superstition, a fear of something ancient and unknowable, lurking in the uncharted woods. His description sent shivers down my spine. The Wendigo, whether real or imagined, became a symbol of all that was unknown and fearsome in the vast wilderness surrounding us. It was as if the creature was not just a figment of folklore, but a manifestation of the untamed, mysterious forces of nature that lay beyond the comforting glow of our campfire. That night, as we prepared for bed, the forest around us seemed alive with hidden watchers, and the darkness felt heavy with unspoken fears. Lying in my bed, I couldn't shake off the eerie sensation that we were not alone, that the Wendigo, a creature of myth, was somehow very real and very close. The wilderness, so vast and uncharted, seemed to hold secrets that even Defago, seasoned as he was, feared to confront. In the stillness of the night, a profound quiet settled over our camp, nestled deep within the Canadian wilderness. It was during these serene moments that the gentle lapping of the lake's waves seemed to synchronize with my slowing pulse. However, this tranquility was unexpectedly pierced by another sound, one that crept into my awareness with a startling intimacy. Before I could even comprehend its nature, this sound evoked a sense of alarm and deep pity within me. I strained to listen, my heartbeat thundering in my ears, masking the source of this mysterious noise. Was it emerging from the lake, or was it whispering through the dense forest? Then, with a jolt that sent my heart fluttering, I realized the sound was not from the wilderness, but from within our tent. It was heartbreakingly close. As I turned towards it, the sound crystallized unmistakably mere feet away. It was the sound of weeping. There, in the dark cocoon of our tent, Defago lay on his makeshift bed of branches, sobbing as though his heart might shatter, his cries muffled by the blankets pressed against his mouth. My initial reaction was one of profound tenderness, a rush of empathy for this display of raw human emotion amidst the overwhelming desolation. It seemed so out of place, so futile. Tears in the vast, indifferent wilderness. It reminded me of a child lost and crying in the middle of the ocean. But then, as fuller understanding dawned, laced with the memories of the preceding day's events, a cold terror descended upon me. "Defago," I whispered, attempting to imbue my voice with gentleness. "What's the matter? Are you in pain? Unhappy?" There was no response, but the sobbing ceased abruptly. I reached out, touching him tentatively. His body remained motionless. "Are you awake?" I wondered if perhaps he was crying in his sleep. "Are you cold?" I noticed his feet, uncovered, protruding from the tent, and draped an extra blanket over them. Defago seemed to have slipped down in his bed, dragging the branches with him. I hesitated to reposition him, fearing I might wake him. I ventured a few more soft questions, waiting in the silence for any response. But none came. Only the sound of Defago's steady, quiet breathing. Gently, I placed my hand on his chest, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall. "If anything's wrong, let me know," I whispered. "Wake me if you feel strange." I lay back down, a myriad of thoughts swirling in my mind. Defago must have been crying in his sleep, troubled by some dream. The memory of his sobbing, so pitiful and profound, would stay with me forever, a sound that seemed to echo the sorrow of the entire wilderness. As I lay there, the events of the past days replayed in my mind, this episode taking its mysterious place among them. Though I tried to rationalize away any unsettling thoughts, a deep-seated unease lingered, stubborn and peculiar, refusing to be dismissed. My contemplation was shattered by a sudden, violent movement. Defago sat upright, trembling with fear. In the dim dawn light, his silhouette was stark against the tent canvas. He was not crying now, but shaking, as if gripped by an unspeakable terror. Calling out to him, my voice seemed lost in the nightmare that enveloped us. Confusion took hold of me. Where were we? Was this a dream or a previous camp? Then, breaking the stillness, a sound like no other shattered the dawn. A voice, or something akin to it, called out in 3 distinct notes that eerily resembled Defago's name. Trying to comprehend this bewildering sound, Defago leapt to his feet with a cry of terror and vanished into the morning light, his words echoing his fear and exhilaration. "My feet of fire! My burning feet of fire!" Lying there, stunned, I tried to process the surreal events. The tent still trembled from Defago's hasty exit. A peculiar, unsettling odor lingered, difficult to define, but pungent. Stepping outside, the pale dawn revealed a still, mist-covered landscape. Defago was nowhere to be seen. His departure had been silent, leaving behind only his haunting memory and the fading, unidentifiable scent. The solitude of the vast wilderness struck me with an overwhelming sense of isolation and responsibility. I had to find Defago, ensure his safety. Overcoming my fear, I set out to search for him, calling his name, but there was no response. The forest seemed to close in on me, its silent trees bearing witness to my struggle. Exhausted and disoriented, I returned to the camp, only to set out again with a more organized plan. This time I discovered tracks in the snow, large, round tracks alongside Defago's smaller footprints. The sight was deeply unsettling, suggesting a frantic chase driven by terror. I ventured deeper into the wilderness, following the tracks, my mind wrestling with the incomprehensible nature of what I was witnessing. The forest remained silent, its vastness overwhelming, as a sense of unseen horror grew within me. Every step forward was a battle against the menacing presence of the wilderness. Determined to find Defago, I continued, marking my path, calling out for him. The events of that morning, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare, were etched into my memory. A haunting encounter set against the backdrop of the mysterious and unforgiving Canadian wilderness.
For a man of his years and inexperience, only a canny Scot, perhaps grounded in common sense and established in logic, could have preserved even that measure of balance that this youth somehow or other did manage to preserve through the whole adventure. Otherwise, 2 things he presently noticed, while forging pluckily ahead, must have sent him headlong back to the comparative safety of his tent, instead of only making his hands close more tightly upon the rifle stock, while his heart, trained for the wee kirk, sent a wordless prayer, winging its way to heaven. Both tracks he saw had undergone a change, and this change, so far as it concerned the footsteps of the man, was in some undecipherable manner appalling. It was in the bigger tracks he first noticed this, and for a long time he could not quite believe his eyes. Was it the blown leaves that produced odd effects of light and shade, or that the dry snow, drifting like finely ground rice about the edges, cast shadows and high lights? Or was it actually the fact that the great marks had become faintly colored? For round about the deep plunging holes of the animal, there now appeared a mysterious reddish tinge, that was more like an effect of light than of anything that dyed the substance of the snow itself. Every mark had it, and had it increasingly, this indistinct fiery tinge that painted a new touch of ghastliness into the picture. But when, wholly unable to explain or to credit it, he turned his attention to the other tracks to discover if they, too, bore similar witness, he noticed that these had meanwhile undergone a change that was infinitely worse, and charged with far more horrible suggestion. For in the last 100 yards or so, he saw that they had grown gradually into the semblance of the parent tread. Imperceptibly the change had come about, yet unmistakably. It was hard to see where the change first began. The result, however, was beyond question. Smaller, neater, more cleanly modeled, they formed now an exact and careful duplicate of the larger tracks beside them. The feet that produced them had, therefore, also changed. And something in his mind reared up with loathing and with terror as he saw it. Simpson for the first time hesitated, then, ashamed of his alarm and indecision, took a few hurried steps ahead. The next instant stopped dead in his tracks. Immediately in front of him, all signs of the trail ceased. Both tracks came to an abrupt end. On all sides, for 100 yards and more, he searched in vain for the least indication of their continuance. There was nothing.
Defago, where are you? Defago! Defago! Where are you?
The trees were very thick just there. Big trees, all of them. Spruce, cedar, hemlock. There was no underbrush. He stood looking about him all distraught, bereft of any power of judgment. Then he set to work to search again, and again, and yet again, but always with the same result. Nothing. The feet that printed the surface of the snow thus far had now, apparently, left the ground. And it was in that moment of distress and confusion that the whip of terror laid its most nicely calculated lash about his heart. It dropped with deadly effect upon the sorest spot of all, completely unnerving him. He had been secretly dreading all the time that it would come, and come it did. Far overhead, muted by great height and distance, strangely thinned and wailing, he heard the crying voice of Defago, the guide. The sound dropped upon him out of that still, wintry sky with an effect of dismay and terror unsurpassed. The rifle fell to his feet. He stood motionless an instant, listening as it were with his whole body, then staggered back against the nearest tree for support, disorganized hopelessly in mind and spirit. To him, in that moment, it seemed the most shattering and dislocating experience he had ever known, so that his heart emptied itself of all feeling whatsoever, as by a sudden draught. Ran in far, beseeching accents of indescribable appeal, this voice of anguish down the sky. Once it called, then silence through all the listening wilderness of trees. And Simpson, scarcely knowing what he did, presently found himself running wildly to and fro, searching, calling, tripping over roots and boulders, and flinging himself in a frenzy of undirected pursuit after the coward. Behind the screen of memory and emotion with which experience veils events, he plunged, distracted and half deranged, picking up false lights like a ship at sea, terror in his eyes and heart and soul. For the panic of the wilderness had called to him in that far voice, the power of untamed distance, the enticement of the desolation that destroys. He knew in that moment all the pains of someone hopelessly and irretrievably lost, suffering the lust and travail of a soul in the final loneliness. A vision of Defago, eternally hunted, driven and pursued across the sky vastness of those ancient forests, fled like a flame across the dark ruin of his thoughts. It seemed ages before he could find anything in the chaos of his disorganized sensations to which he could anchor himself steady for a moment and think. The cry was not repeated. His own hoarse calling brought no response. The inscrutable forces of the wild had summoned their victim beyond recall and held him fast. Yet he searched and called, it seems, for hours afterwards, for it was late in the afternoon when at length he decided to abandon a useless pursuit and return to his camp on the shores of 50 Island Water. Even then he went with reluctance, that crying voice still echoing in his ears. With difficulty he found his rifle and the homeward trail, the concentration necessary to follow the badly blazed trees, and a biting hunger that gnawed, helped to keep his mind steady. Otherwise, he admits, the temporary aberration he had suffered might have been prolonged to the point of positive disaster. Gradually the ballast shifted back again, and he regained something that approached his normal equilibrium. But for all that the journey through the gathering dusk was miserably haunted, he heard innumerable following footsteps, voices that laughed and whispered, and saw figures crouching behind trees and boulders, making signs to one another for a concerted attack the moment he had passed. The creeping murmur of the wind made him start and listen. He went stealthily, trying to hide where possible, and making as little sound as he could. The shadows of the woods, hitherto protective or covering merely, had now become menacing, challenging, and the pageantry in his frightened mind masked a host of possibilities that were all the more ominous for being obscure. The presentiment of a nameless doom lurked ill-concealed behind every detail of what had happened. It was really admirable how he emerged victor in the end. Men of riper powers and experience might have come through the ordeal with less success. He had himself tolerably well in hand, all things considered, and his plan of action proves it. Sleep being absolutely out of the question, and traveling an unknown trail in the darkness equally impracticable, he sat up the whole of that night, rifle in hand, before a fire he never for a single moment allowed to die down. The severity of the haunted vigil marked his soul for life, but it was successfully accomplished, and with the very first signs of dawn, he set forth upon the long return journey to the home camp to get help. As before, he left a written note to explain his absence, and to indicate where he had left a plentiful cache of food and matches, though he had no expectation that any human hands would find them. How Simpson found his way alone by the lake and forest might well make a story in itself, for to hear him tell it is to know the passionate loneliness of soul that a man can feel when the wilderness holds him in the hollow of its illimitable hand and laughs. It is also to admire his indomitable pluck. As Simpson's harrowing journey continued, his reliance on instinct and a deep primal sense of orientation became his only allies in the unforgiving wilderness. He followed the nearly invisible trail mechanically, driven by an unconscious guiding force that was as old as humanity itself, instinct. In the wild, this innate instinct often takes over, leading individuals through challenges that logic alone cannot overcome. In Simpson's case, he may have tapped into a sense of orientation known to animals and primitive humans, an intuitive connection with the natural world that allowed him to navigate the tangled wilderness. This primal awareness, honed by countless generations of survival, served as his compass through the dense forest. Despite the fading light, Simpson used his compass to the best of his ability, steering his frail canoe across the center of the lake. The relief he felt at leaving the forest behind was immense. The water's calm surface provided a stark contrast to the oppressive woods, offering a sense of safety and direction. Fortunately, as he approached the camp, he saw the welcoming light of the other hunters' fires. This flickering beacon served as a guiding star, helping him reach his destination. It was close to midnight when his canoe finally grated on the sandy cove, and the arrival of Simpson, exhausted and broken by his ordeal, brought both relief and concern to his companions, Hank, Punk, and I. We rushed to his aid, helping the weary traveler out of the canoe and guiding him toward a dying campfire. The wilderness had tested Simpson to the limits of his endurance, but he had emerged from its clutches, forever marked by the experience. Upon entering this sphere of horror and mysticism that had been plaguing Simpson, I noticed a marked change in him. My straightforward approach and firm handshake seemed to ground him, bringing a semblance of normalcy to the bizarre events he had endured. "Hello, my boy, and what's up now?" I asked. This introduction of a more rational viewpoint seemed to help him regain a bit of his usual composure. Yet when it came time for Simpson to recount his tale to our gathered group, I could see him struggling. He shared enough to convey the gravity of the situation, leading to a swift decision to form a rescue party. Noting his exhausted state, I administered a light sedative, which quickly sent him into a deep sleep. Later, as he recounted the events in more detail, it became apparent that he had initially omitted several important aspects. In my presence, he seemed reluctant to delve into the more fantastical elements of his experience. We understood that Defago had suffered a manic episode, believing himself called by an unknown entity, and had disappeared into the wilderness. The next day, I gently probed Simpson for more information. He gradually opened up, revealing more about the true nature of his experience. He spoke of Defago's mentions of a Wendigo, his disturbed sleep, and the strange scent in the camp. Simpson admitted the disorienting effect of the odor, but was hesitant to share some of the more bizarre aspects of his tale. As we approached the search area, Simpson confided in me about hearing Defago's calls for help, and described the changing nature of Defago's tracks in the snow. Yet he refrained from mentioning the extraordinary length of these tracks, likely fearing how it might sound. I felt compelled to offer a rational explanation for these events. The spell of these terrible solitudes, I said, cannot leave any mind untouched. It has worked upon yours, as it did upon mine at your age. I suggested that the wilderness can often play tricks on the mind, especially under stress. I reassured him that his reactions, while perhaps exaggerated, were understandable given the circumstances. Upon reaching the campsite, everything was as we had left it, except the cache had been raided by wildlife. Hank noted Defago's absence and the uncertainty of the situation. Simpson, now a bit more composed, detailed everything to Hank and me, omitting only the strange language Defago had used. Our conversation that evening, tinged with the mystery of Defago's fate and the peculiar nature of the Wendigo legend, was heavy with the weight of the unknown. Hank, though familiar with the legend, was reluctant to delve too deeply into it. As the night deepened, our discussion stayed anchored in the eerie events we were entangled in. Surrounded by a blanket of silence in the snowy wilderness, our little group sat huddled around the fire, the flames casting eerie shadows into the night. The stillness was punctuated only by our voices and the soft crackling of the fire. Occasionally a sound, light as a moth's flutter, whisked through the air. None of us seemed eager to sleep as time inched closer to midnight. Breaking a particularly long pause, I, perhaps in an attempt to dispel the growing unease, commented on the legend we'd been discussing. The Wendigo, then, is essentially a personification of the call of the wild, leading some to their doom, I observed. That's about right, Hank responded after a moment. And when it calls your name, unmistakably. Another silence followed, which I again broke abruptly. The allegory is intriguing, I said, my gaze scanning the dark periphery of our camp. They say the voice mimics the sounds of the bush, wind, animal cries, and the like. Once it's heard, the victim is lost, succumbing to the irresistible lure of the wild. It's said the feet and the eyes are most affected, the feet for the urge to wander, and the eyes for the longing for beauty. They say such a victim moves at a speed so fierce that it causes his feet to burn. As I spoke, I couldn't help but glance apprehensively into the surrounding darkness. The Wendigo, they say, burns its feet from the sheer velocity of its movement. Simpson listened, his face a mask of horror. But it was Hank's pallor that was most striking. Simpson seemed as if he wanted to block out the reality before him. The tension broke when Hank suddenly stood and let out an ear-piercing yell into the night, as if to challenge the silence. "That's for Defago," he said, his laugh tinged with defiance. "I bet my old partner isn't far from us right now." His outburst startled us all. His face was ashen, a stark contrast to my momentary loss of composure. Hank's declaration was chilling, his belief that Defago was nearby unsettling. In the ensuing quiet, a large shape moved swiftly overhead, displacing air and sending down a faint wind-like cry of human anguish.
Oh, my feet of fire, my burning feet of fire!
Hank went pale, glancing around bewilderedly. I let out an involuntary cry, instinctively moving toward the tent before halting, as if frozen. Simpson, maintaining a degree of composure, recognized the cry. "That's the cry I heard," he said quietly. "The very words Defago used." He then shouted into the night, calling for Defago. Before anyone could react, there was the sound of something heavy falling through the trees and landing with a crash. Hank whispered fearfully, his hand moving towards his hunting knife. "He's coming," he added, a horrific laughter edging his voice as the sound of heavy footsteps approached through the darkness. As the footsteps neared, we stood frozen around the fire. I felt a sudden withering within me, my eyes fixed and unblinking. Hank, visibly distressed, seemed on the brink of action, yet remained immobile. We were like petrified children, the scene grotesque in its horror. The footsteps continued their relentless approach, unseen yet unmistakably drawing nearer, each crunch of the frozen snow amplifying the terror. The prolonged nature of this advance seemed almost too surreal to be real, a cursed and unending march towards us. Then, emerging into the fire's dim light, a figure appeared. It halted, staring fixedly at us, then moved spasmodically closer, revealing itself to be a man, Defago. A skin of horror seemed to envelop each of us. Defago's approach, faltering and uncertain, brought him face to face with Simpson. His voice, faint and wheezy, broke the silence. "Here I am, Boss Simpson. I'm having a hellfire kind of a trip. His laugh was disturbing, his face thrust forward into Simpson's. The sight triggered a reaction from Hank, who burst out with a stream of incoherent oaths, stepping between them. I followed, my movements deliberate but stumbling, my mind racing to grasp the situation. Simpson stood still, overwhelmed. The sight of Defago's visage at such proximity was bewildering. Hank's outburst and my own attempts to speak of practical matters, such as warmth and food, seemed to swirl around us in a confusing torrent. It was Simpson who voiced the doubt haunting each of us. "It is you, isn't it, Defago?" His voice trembled with horror. I responded hastily, too loudly, "Of course it is. He's just exhausted and terrified." My overemphasis betrayed my own disbelief. The pervasive, unaccustomed odor in the air added to the surreal atmosphere. The figure before us, claimed to be Defago, was a grotesque shadow of the man we knew. His face and body distorted, his skin loose as though he had been under great pressure, was barely recognizable. He was a chilling caricature of the guide we had last seen. Hank's emotion erupted as he distanced himself from the light, shouting defiantly, "You ain't Defago." His horror and disbelief were palpable. Tears followed his outburst, and I eventually managed to calm him, leading him into the tent. Approaching the figure by the fire, I asked Defago to tell us what had happened. His response was a weak whisper. "I seen that great Wendigo thing. I've been with it too." Before more could be said, Hank's voice erupted from the tent, terror-stricken. "His feet! Look at his feet!" Defago shifted, revealing his feet in the light, but the sight was so brief and confusing that Simpson hardly grasped it. Then suddenly, Defago stood, his expression dark and malicious. "Now you seen my fiery, burning feet," he wheezed. His voice was cut short by a roaring wind that swept around the camp, the trees shaking violently. In an instant, Defago was gone, vanishing into the darkness with a speed that left us unable to react. His departing cry echoed from the sky. Hank, overcome with emotion, tried to rush after him, but I grabbed him, holding him back. His belief that the figure was not Defago was vehement. We managed to calm Hank, but Simpson was left in a state of shock, speaking incoherently into his blanket. The strain of the night had taken its toll on all of us. As dawn broke, I lit the fire and prepared breakfast, waking the others. We were 3 perplexed and troubled men, each grappling with the night's haunting events in our own way. Our return journey was marked by a heavy silence. Hank, closer to his primitive instincts, recovered first. I, more civilized, took longer to reconcile with what we had witnessed. Simpson, the divinity student, tried to rationalize the experience, seeing it as a glimpse into a primitive past, a survival of ancient superstitions and untamed natural forces. We rarely spoke of the incident afterward. Once, much later, Simpson asked me about the odors and the nature of what we had seen. My answers were non-committal, uncharacteristically uncertain. The experience had left its mark, challenging our understanding of the natural world and the limits of human knowledge. Upon our return to camp, we found it seemingly deserted. Then, to our astonishment, we discovered the real Defago, or what was left of him, by the extinguished fire. He was a mere shell of himself, devoid of mind and memory, barely clinging to life. The ordeal he had endured in the wilderness had stripped him of his very humanity. Punk, who had witnessed Defago's return, had fled in terror, understanding the full horror of what had transpired. Defago had encountered the Wendigo, and it had left him a broken, unrecognizable husk. Defago's condition worsened over the winter, and he did not survive. His memory never returned, and the true extent of what he had experienced in the wilderness remained a haunting, unsolved mystery.
This Wainwright's ordeal with the Wendigo, what he and Simpson went through, it's more horrific than we imagined.
He kept this from us. Yes, but at such a cost. The trauma of that experience. It's clear now why he remained silent.
It's a painful truth. Wainwright bore this burden alone, perhaps out of fear or to protect us from this darkness.
We respect his silence. This information, it stays within these walls. But we can't ignore the insights it gives us into the supernatural forces at Witchcrest Peak.
I'll return this to his quarters. Wainwright's secret will be honored, but we'll use what we've learned to guide us.
We move forward with a new understanding of what we're facing. It's a difficult path, but we're better prepared now.
Dakota enters Dr. Wainwright's room quietly, the door closing with a soft click behind him. They are alone at last, two confidants in the calm before a storm.
Gunakti. I trust you're feeling somewhat better.
Coda, your presence is a comfort. The heart attack was mild, but a jarring reminder of mortality.
Your laugh can't mask the trouble in your eyes. What's weighing on you?
My dear Coda, you see right through me. As always.
What is it? Did your journey north before this not go well?
On the contrary. The expedition itself went without incident. We eluded the cultists with some clever distractions by my associate. The young lady was returned to her family unharmed, and the knowledge I've gained, it could be pivotal for our endeavors here.
And yet?
I was bestowed insights from her mother, a seeress of ancient lineage. In her gratitude, she offered me a glimpse into the unseen. One question, she said, her voice a resonant chime. The room chilled as she veiled herself and slipped into the otherworldly trance. When prompted, I asked simply, What do I need to know? Her pause was a chasm, bridging doubt and destiny. Do you really want to know? She questioned. I nearly balked, Coda, but I stood firm. For the good of those I serve, I declared. And then she showed me a future that Reinhardt must never bear witness to.
Gunakti?
It was a vision of cataclysm to Coda, of a future steeped in desolation. I must believe I was shown this to thwart it, not to witness it come to pass. I've already written to Harvard. I'll be here in this fight for as long as it takes. This burden, I must carry it. Failure is a luxury I cannot afford.
And why not confide in Mr. Hendrickson?
It would shatter him, my friend. And what if I am mistaken?
And if this can't be averted?
Then, my dear Coda, the cost may be more than I can bear. I saw Witchcrest Peak, not as we know it, but hollowed out, barren. The mining operation that has given so much life to this town was simply gone. And the town itself, it was nothing but dust, as if the earth had claimed it back, leaving behind a silence so profound.
And the people?
That's just it, Coda. There were none. No miners, no laughter from the tavern, no children playing in the streets. It was as though a great wind had swept through and carried away every soul.
This vision, it is a warning, not a fate, sealed. We must see it as a sign, a call to action. That the spirits do not speak lightly. We have been given this glimpse for a reason.
Yes, you're right. It is not a certainty, but a possibility we must work to prevent. We must guard against whatever darkness could lead to such a desolate future.
We will stand as the bulwark against the storm. The history of this land is yet to be written, and we will not allow it to be etched in ash and sorrow.
I will document everything. Our research, our actions, everything will be laid down so that even if we do not succeed, those who come after may find a way where we could not.
Then let us begin at first light. The threads of this future will not unravel themselves. If this vision comes to pass, we will face it together. This estate, this land, is more than its history and hauntings.
Your words are a balm, Coda, but this is a burden I must bear alone. It's not just the estate at stake, it's everything.
You are not alone. The spirits of this land stand with us. My ancestors knew of such trials, of darkness that sought to swallow the light. They also knew that no one man can withstand such a storm alone.
Perhaps you are right. Still, I fear involving Reinhardt could complicate matters. He has a good heart, but it is not braced for such truths.
Then we shall prepare without alarming him. We will fortify the estate, gather knowledge, use our logic, and stand vigilant. And when the time comes, we will do what must be done.
Yes, knowledge, logic. Yes, that is the key. We must delve deeper into the lore, the land and its legends. There is an answer there, I'm certain of it.
And then we shall seek it out. Within the earth, the sky, the ancient texts, and the whispering winds. We'll find the path through this impending darkness.
Tomorrow we begin. We'll chart a course through every tale and truth hidden within Witchcrest Peak. We'll unravel this mystery from its roots.
And so it will be. Rest now. Gunakti, gather your strength. We have a long road ahead, and you will need all your wits about you.
Thank you, my friend. Until the...
My friends, as we draw the curtain on the Canadien incident, we are enveloping a tale that resonates with more than just the whispers of the wind up north. Consider this as you leave us tonight. Sometimes shadows aren't just those cast by our physical surroundings. Sometimes they're a result of memories, of choices made, and of paths avoided. In the stillness of Witchcrest Peak, under the watchful gaze of the moon, we've shared a story that bridges the distance between our quiet valley and the vast, snow-swept expanses of Canada. It's a reminder that our tales, like the spirits that roam these halls, know no borders, no boundaries. As the night deepens and the mist embraces Shadowbrook Camp, let us ponder the mysteries that unite us, the stories that traverse lands and time to reach our ears. And let us remember that in every whisper of the wind, in every creak of the floorboards, there lies a story waiting to be told. Thank you for joining us tonight. May your dreams be undisturbed by the spirits that linger here, and may you wake to a world less shadowed by the unknown. Until our paths cross again in the halls of Zariya Hollow. Good night.